Hey Star Wars fans, today I had the absolute pleasure of getting to talk to Ryan Serrano from Fantasy Flight Games. Ryan is one of the designers of Star Wars Unlimited, lead designing set far in the future, and has been working on some of the other sets here. Ryan wears a lot of hats at Fantasy Flight, but one of his big ones is that he is the appointed Rules Admiral for Star Wars Unlimited, and he's the one who was in charge for wording out that comprehensive rules document that we have been using to figure out all of our rules conundrums. And also, he served an integral role in developing the Twin Suns multiplayer format. So Ryan has a lot of really fascinating things to say, and he was an absolute pleasure to chat with for over an hour. I hope you find this an interesting interview with some unique insight, and stay tuned towards the end of the interview for some crucial rules document information about the upcoming changes to the comprehensive rules document, and a question that we have had answered at last about the one and only Admiral Ozzel as well. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. Let's jump into the interview. Welcome, Ryan. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm so excited to have you here joining us today to talk, of course, about Star Wars Unlimited. Ryan, you and I got a chance to connect just a little bit back a couple months ago at the sort of the special get-together you guys held in the cities, and we were about to do a recording, and then I realized my camera was dead. So
I remember that, yeah.
And then I think I like hurt myself on something, and then I needed like medical aid, or like the team rushed in with a Band-Aid or something. I was bleeding everywhere. It was an eventful end of the night at that point, but I really appreciate you taking the time to join me here on webcam now to talk this over. And we have a lot of stuff since then, of course, with the release of the game that I'm excited to get to talk to you about here.
I'm excited as well. I hope also we can get through this interview. No injuries to you, no injuries to me, no injuries to the game. Should be pretty good.
Yeah, hopefully. I think you and I should be okay, but injuries to the game, we'll have to see about that. I would love if you could, really quick, just start by giving everyone an introduction. You've been on a few like podcasts and stuff so far, but there are definitely going to be some people who have missed those. So why don't you let everyone know who you are and what your role is at FFG and with SWU?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Ryan. I am one of the game designers on Star Wars Unlimited. I'm one of the new ones, so I'm not one of the senior designers, which are Danny, Tyler, and Jeremy, but I'm one of the other group of four who are the younger designers in terms of how long we've been at FFG. And I help design the game. So I work with designing specific sets, helping out with playtesting, doing all the stuff that's involved in making the game as great as it can be. I'm also the Rules Admiral for the game, which means that I am the primary person responsible for creating the comprehensive rules document, and also making sure that everything aligns and works together well when we're looking at how the actual backbone, the underlying skeleton of the game works.
So you're the person who everyone gets to blame when their opponent ECLs in their fire spray, and then they get to ambush and then ready it and then attack again. They just blame you.
Me specifically, yes.
Although
everyone on the team, we all come together when there's any sort of knotty question about the rules. We all come together as a group and decide, how is this intended to work? How should it work? What are the possible interactions? What sort of future proofing do we need to do with the rules? There's a lot of that, a lot of things that we're thinking about. The rules need to interact in this way for something that's coming way down the line. So we try to do as much of that as we can. But yes, I'm happy to take as much blame as you'd like if a ruling does not go your way in any particular tournament that you're in.
Perfect. I'll remember that. I might need that because they haven't always been going my way either. So, and if you could, because I remember talking to you guys previously and hearing about a very interesting, just diverse set of backgrounds for everyone who's on the design team. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, both, I guess, I think relevant, of course, inside TCGs, but what kind of line of work you came from prior to this might be an interesting tidbit for people too.
Yeah, absolutely. This is my first job within the industry here at FFG. Although I've been designing board games on my own in indie circles since I was a kid. I've always kind of been working on at least 3 or 4 prototypes and projects at any given time in my life, and then finally decided to actually pursue a real career in it. And I'm really excited to be working on such a great game right from the get-go. I originally was in academia for a number of years, a couple other people on the team also have some teaching backgrounds as well. Yeah, and then I've been a gamer my whole life. Playing board games, TCGs. Most of what I used to design was more board game focused when I was working on my own projects. Although I've spent a lot of time in the TCG world and played a lot of different games, some of them more competitively than others.
Of course, yeah. And your teaching background, of course, makes sense that you've got the rules admiral role, a role that's very much about how to most succinctly explain something so that people understand it with full clarity. And I'm sure there's some translation in the skill set there too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was in Russian literature actually,
Oh,
and
yeah. I mean,
so
that's the
I
exact
have
same thing.
I have a lot of experience both with translation and with very long, dense paragraphs of text.
Oh, that makes sense. That does. As much as I like to joke about that, not like being kind of a weird translation, it does make sense actually when you think about it too. So,
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
very very
I found the
sensible.
skill set very useful.
Yeah. Who would have guessed that if you want to go into game design, you should start at Russian literature? That's kind of the obvious 1-2 step to take.
I will give that advice to anyone who wants to hear it.
So, Ryan, if we can jump in and just talk a little bit, we're going to start by talking a few questions about game design in general, because obviously that's kind of one of your big roles there.
Sure.
You mentioned you're one of the newer members of the design team. There's a bunch of senior members that have been making around on these interviews and everything as well. A lot of people know them. They show up obviously fairly commonly on like the live streams and everything.
Yeah.
And you've, of course, had the opportunity to work with these senior members directly, designing sets, working, I believe, from what I understand, working, they've been leading some of the first few sets and you guys have been helping. And then in some of the later sets, it sounds like some of you guys, the newer ones, are starting to lead the sets as
Mhm.
well, correct?
Yeah, that is entirely true. Yes, we
Yes.
are taking much more of a driver's seat in some of the future sets. Although, of course, all of them are continuing to work on sets as well.
Right, of course, of course. So I was curious, that's just an interesting role, sort of a mentor mentee role in some ways as well to jump into. Do you have any? Can you talk a little bit about how some of those senior members might have, influenced the design strategy that you approach with now that you've gotten to work with them a little bit? Do you have any big lessons you've learned from any of them in particular that have helped shape how you're approaching design now?
I think the most important thing that I've learned from them is more as a group than from any of them individually. Obviously, each of them has improved me as a designer already in just the year that I've been working here. Gotten to be much better game player just by watching Jeremy Zwern, of course.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that really the main thing that I've learned from them is just working as part of a design team. Since almost all of my experience prior to this was working on more solo designs, which is a much different beast when you get to make all of the decisions for what goes into a game. Versus when you're trying to balance a lot of people's perspectives and opinions, as well as balancing a lot of different goals that the game is trying to hit, things we're trying to meet as a game. So watching the three of them primarily interact and how they go about resolving conflicts. When someone thinks, "Oh, this card's a little bit too overpowered," someone else thinks the card's a little underpowered. Someone thinks it's really niche or really important for a particular archetype. Watching how those conversations have gone has been really helpful. Learning how to the common phrase "kill your darlings," but have a design that you really, really, really love, and then it just doesn't quite fit in the set at the end of the day, or it's just a little bit too strong, or it kind of falls apart a little bit at the seams, and being willing to let that go. I know that Tyler in particular, who I work very closely with, I'm working with him on 2 of the upcoming sets. He is. I don't know how he does it. He is so good at letting go of an idea if it doesn't work, and that has been very, very helpful to watch myself, because we have a lot of ideas. We want to put as many of them into the game as possible. And sometimes you have to accept that a certain idea or a certain mechanic is just not the right time for it, or it's just not the right game for it. And learning how to handle that with grace, and also learning when to push for your idea, when to hold back a little bit, that sort of push and pull of it has been something that's been really, really useful. And the senior designers have a lot more experience with that than I do. So that's been probably the main thing that I've learned from them.
Cool. Yeah, that's reminiscent of something that I think last year at Gen Con I got to talk with Jay Z for a little while, Jeremy Zwern, about and that we couldn't talk about a lot then. The game had just been demoed. Is like I had a whole list of things that I couldn't even broach, but we did at least understand the initial drawing 6 cards and then putting 2 down as resources. And I believe, if I recall, he was telling me that that was a part of the game design where he had to push a little bit to make it so that you got to. I think initially he said something about it started with draw 4 and then just put 2 down from the top of your deck, but then he would like pushed for no, we get so much more agency when people draw 6 and then get to choose 2 cards in their hand to put down. Um, so there's certainly times I'm sure you found where when pushing is important, because I think a lot of us appreciate greatly mechanics like that in the game.
Yeah, and also when sometimes there's a lot of people out there that are going to play the game, and each of us on the design team probably represents some subset of people that would really like. If I enjoy something in Star Wars Unlimited, I know there's someone else out there, probably a group of people that would also enjoy that thing, and so making sure that enough of the things that you enjoy make it into the game, so that those people out there that are like-minded are also going to find those things to enjoy as well, is nice. But obviously you have to defer to others when there are certain designs or things that you don't enjoy. There are certain archetypes I really, really dislike, but those are important parts of the game, and it's important to make sure that those get to shine too. And it's nice that we have a pretty good spread, I think, among the designers of things that we enjoy, and we cover a lot of bases, just making sure that each of us is happy when a particular set is finished.
Yeah, for sure. There are all types of players. Is there a particular type of player that you identify yourself as, that you are able to kind of, I know it can be difficult because like if you're anything like me, I love control, but I like my current favorite deck is a very aggressive deck, and I'll just, I'm pretty adaptable in that regard. But do you feel like there's a type of player that you can kind of pin down yourself as, that when we see something in a set, we think, oh, I wonder if Ryan had a hand in this kind of card?
Well, I am definitely more on the aggro mid-range side of things rather than control. We have some other great control players on the team, but that's not really my style as much. The main thing that I really like to do in trading card games when I'm playing them is to find certain combinations of cards that interact that no one has ever put together in a deck before, and that you're going through maybe several sets from now, you're looking through hundreds and hundreds of cards. You find 2 cards, you think, wow, wait, what if I put these 2 together and take them? I wonder if I could pull this off. And I could lose 9 out of 10 games, but if I win that one game with the strategy that I came up with these 2 random cards, I'll be so happy. And so a lot of from the design side, what that means is not necessarily finding specific things and hiding them in the game for people to find, but more making designs for certain cards that are a little bit open-ended, cards that maybe when you first see it, you're like, I'm not really sure why this card exists, but it sort of itches the back of your brain. You think there's something else maybe out there that I could put with this that could be interesting. Those kind of cards, the cards that you might see in a set, and I know this sounds weird, the cards you might see in a set that you look at and you're like, I don't know why this card is here. I don't exactly know what it's doing. That might be something that I had a little bit to do with, and there might be something down the road that synergizes with that in a cool way.
So you get to you're working on set 7 or something, and you adjust a card that hasn't gone to print yet in set 5 just to like make it work with sets. And not that's what's actually happening, but that's the kind of idea you're getting at.
Sure. Yeah, and I can say that I know that I've done it at least once in the 2 sets that I'm helping being in charge of right now. There's at least one card that needs another card in a later set to really fully encapsulate what I wanted that card to do. Which is kind of fun to do.
That's so cool, and that's a really nice benefit of having this really deep pipeline that you guys have, where you're working so far in advance that I assume you must be able to treat it a little bit more as sort of a fluid system when it's far enough down where it's like you can make some, not huge tweaks, but you can make some tweaks to those sets that you already are getting close to locking in, because you're already, what's coming a little more in advance this time.
Yeah, we get to see a little bit on both sides of things. There's
Yeah.
positives and negatives working as far in advance as we do. One of the, I mean, that's obviously one of the positives is getting to kind of establish our own sense of an internal meta. One of the negatives, of course, being that it's harder for us to respond to external meta pressures, things that people discover in the wild. A little bit longer before we can necessarily put in a card to address the situation. We try to be very thoughtful about the cards that we put in and making sure that, like, well, we know that, if this card was to get too out of control, we wouldn't be able to address it for a little while. So maybe we pull back on that a little bit right now. Maybe we try to seed some things just in case, put some just in case cards into a set here and there. But yeah, positives and negatives. But I think it's really cool. And one of the biggest negatives for me personally is that I can't talk about all the cool things that are coming for a very, very, very long time.
I know. Oh, as much as I wish I could sit here and just say, Ryan, just spill the beans. What's set 7's theme? Like, what are the characters? But yeah, that's that question got nixed very quickly.
Yeah,
but
trying to explain to even like my family or something, like, oh, what are you working on? Oh, I can tell you in a couple years. You'll get to see what I'm doing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a very unique thing, I think, to TCGs in general. And I think my next question I wanted to ask is about those differences between TCGs and a lot, like you said, a lot of your previous design experiences with more closed system games like board games. You put it together, you put it out there. There may be expansions in the future. You can leave room to expand things, but in general, you create a closed system and you want this game to be, this is the clean game. It's got flexibility, variety, it's got options, and it's all built into a nice package. Now, when you moved from designing more closed system games like board games to being focused in on this TCG, what was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome in how you approach designing?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question, because it's digging at some of the things that make different genres of games very unique, and particularly from a design standpoint. It's very important. If we designed this like a board game, for instance, it would probably not do very well. I think one of the biggest things that a TCG has that board games don't have is that players are engaging with it to express their own creativity. So it's not necessarily, if you're playing a board game, you're going to sit down, play this character. It's kind of, as you mentioned, a closed system. I'm going to experience this game. I'm going to try to do the best that I can at it. Maybe I'm going to get into my role thematically. But the creation process is much different, right? And someone could come to a TCG and express their creativity, like I was saying earlier, like I do, by finding some sort of cool combo of cards that they don't think anyone else has ever seen before. Or maybe they could express their creativity by building a particularly thematic deck that revolves around the things that they like. They want to build a deck entirely full of droids and just put every droid in that deck and make that deck as good as they could possibly make it. And so that idea of putting enough tools out there, we're kind of giving players a toolbox and making sure there's enough interesting things there for them to put together. And if all that happens when we put the game out is that people create the exact same decks that we created internally when we were designing the game, that's probably a failing on our part. We want to make sure there's enough tools that people are making things that we did not anticipate. It's this part of what makes the meta exciting and interesting. Whereas in a board game, if someone was able to play that board game in a way that the designers did not anticipate, that's probably a negative thing, and they probably missed something major in the design.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and I mean, I think there's something interesting about that too, where like if players are finding decks that you didn't, and they're particularly powerful decks, that that's potentially a little bit of a frightening thing too. It's like, oh, we missed that interaction. That's pretty strong, and now you have to figure out how to like adapt to that.
Yeah, and that's never happened ever before in the history of a trading card game. That you miss some sort of crazy strong interaction, have to deal with it later.
Yeah, not a single time. But yeah, that it'll be interesting to see again how things will progress as we go forward, and what types of new things people discover that haven't been seen yet. I want to talk a little bit about what people have discovered in set one that you've been watching the reception. Of course, you came in, as far as I understand, pretty late in the process for set one, but you of course got you got the full lowdown on what people kind of thought the game was going to be like internally, and all the decks people had been playing and everything. Have you seen anything that any reactions players have had to sets, or to the set or to particular cards or interactions that surprised you based on what you kind of expected the player response to be to certain cards or decks or strategies? And has that impacted your design in future sets as well?
Sure. I think that I can kind of answer that in two different ways.
Sure.
So on the one hand, if you're talking purely in terms of power, what's out there, I think that we all knew that Energy Conversion Lab ECL, very strong card. I don't think that we expected the level of ubiquity that you see out there, in the sense of what percentage of tournament decks are running ECL, even in very different leaders, but a lot of players are running ECL out there right now.
Mhm.
I don't think that the sheer quantity of that or the percentage of that was necessarily that's higher than we expected for it. We certainly knew that it was a strong card. So that's one very specific instance of us thinking through. Okay, this was very 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 strong, and that's important to keep track of cards that can give out ambush to other cards in the future. Keep an eye on that. Make sure we're not doing it too much. Make sure that we're doing things that interact with that or ways to respond to that that can be really useful. The action compression is something that we want to allow into the game a little bit, but we don't want it to get too crazy.
Right.
And then another totally different way is that we've seen a lot of people really respond positively to some of the more thematic cards, the more thematic interactions that people have. People, really love that R2D2 and C3PO work together. Folks really love I Am Your Father as a
Yes.
card. And that sort of thing gives us a lot more confidence on the design side when we see people responding and liking those cards and talking about how much they like them. Gives us a lot more confidence to put more little fun thematic cards in the future. Obviously, we're trying to be as thematic as possible with a lot of the cards in the set. But when someone comes up with a really thematic design, sometimes we think, is this a little bit too cute? Is this getting a little too weird? Seeing people respond and really enjoy those interactions and those cards gives us more confidence to put out more cards like them in the future.
Yeah, the response to "I Am Your Father" in particular is one that it never fails. I feel like every single time when I've talked to new people or I show the game to people, they read the card and they say, this is so cool." Like I've had so many people just say, "I don't even think this is a good play right now, but I have to do this. Like Luke's in play, I have to "I Am Your Father" him." Like that is a hallmark of of a really resonant design at that point. The kind of card where I think people see that design and they immediately get more interested in the game, because of just how much it resonates with them.
Yeah, the one of my favorite interactions or moments that I've had in the game so far is I was introducing a couple friends of mine to this demo decks at Gen Con last past year. And they sat down to play, and one of them played "I'm Your Father" on the other person playing, and they shouted out no, not having read the card or knowing what the card said to do. They just shouted no because it was thematic to shout no. And then they looked at the card and realized that the card also told them they could shout no. And that was a lot of fun for them. So
I hope that was the response they wanted to "I'm Your Father," because otherwise they based on the rules of the game, they said no. So therefore
they did technically say no.
Okay, so my next question. This is my most, I think, my wordiest one that I have on the list here. So let me make sure I can get through this cleanly. This question is actually referring to a previous interview that you did. You did an interview with the guys at the Force Unlimited a little while back. And I was listening to that, a really, really fascinating interview. We'll have it linked in the description below, by the way, for anyone who wants to check out. Listen to Ryan talk even more. You've got another good hour of content, Ryan content there for you. So in that interview, you were talking a little bit about how leader abilities are, sometimes they're have a little bit more of an impact on the game. You have always access to them. So every single game you can kind of consistently get this out there. So they have, just because of that consistent access, you in design sometimes pull back a little bit on access to similar abilities. I think the example from the interview was Director Krennic gives Villainy and Vigilance Restore 2 on a stick, as we like to say. It's just right there. You can always access it, get that restore going. And that may have played a bit of a role in why Vigilance Villainy doesn't have as much restore in set one as Heroes and Villainy. At the same time, there's of course thematic considerations. Villains aren't about healing as much as heroes are, but the thing that kind of caught me in that conversation was eventually you get to this point where you print enough Del Micos, you print enough stuff like that, there will be a significant amount of restore, and then we'll also have Krennic tapped in there. And it just got me thinking a little bit, as future sets release, are you worried about some of these things where maybe they're pared back a little bit due to current leaders in the pool? Are you worried about hitting a critical mass with certain effects where enough of it printed now is like, oh, okay, maybe this deck has too much access to restore. It's actually a little too wild. You can't get any damage through. And does the team taking any steps to avoid stacking too many similar abilities together as this card pool grows and grows and grows to the point where it would get detrimental in some way?
Sure. I think there's two kind of things that question is getting at. So on the one hand, yes, we definitely are thinking about in any given set what the leaders, particularly the common leaders, are giving players access to. And there's less of that in the set. You want synergy pieces, but you don't want to kind of step on the toes of the leaders, since the leaders are going to be there as you say in every game. So we want like a leader like Krennic who has restore on him. Maybe there's less restore in the blue villain pool, but we are also thinking about constructed and how constructed is going to exist over the course of multiple sets. So it's important, particularly when we're thinking about limited cards, so mostly commons and uncommons, because those are the cards that show up the most often in limited. So we're thinking about that within any given set's limited pool, how the common leaders correspond to the cards that you'll see in that limited pool, so you'll get access to everything in a nice, neat way. One of the things that I really love the limited in this game. I love playing draft, so we really do take a lot of care to make sure that the limited environments are nice and flow very well. That being said, the second half of your question, the idea of can some things get out of control? Absolutely. You can see that if we take a set one and we look at all the control tools that set one has, for instance, let's look at even just blue villainy. Vigilance villainy. They have access to a lot of great control tools. And so set 2 comes out. We want to make sure that they have access to control tools, but now already we're thinking, okay, in a vigilance villainy deck that uses both set 1 and set 2, now they have access to 2 sets worth of nice control tools. And then set 3 comes out, and then set 4 comes out. So it's definitely something that we are keeping an eye on. We like to think that we have kind of a budget across an entire rotation or an entire group of sets. We like to try to keep to a budget both within a given set, but also over the course of an entire, however long that is. And so we're keeping an eye on that sort of thing. It's a little bit weird when you encounter set 1, because set 1 has to be the jack of all trades set, right? Set 1 has to be doing everything, and it has to be doing everything in a way that introduces the game well, introduces all these different concepts, has all of these different things that's doing, all these plays that's juggling simultaneously. And so set 1 eats up a lot of that budget in certain respects. But we are keeping tabs on kind of how much of it can exist in the future. The big ones that stand out obviously are things that make the game unfun to play. So cards that are just, let's say, just a stall deck, for instance. All the deck wants to do is just stop the opponent from playing the game. It's not trying to win the game either. It's just trying to wait it out. We don't want there to be so many tools in the game that deck has a perfect curve and can answer everything and there's no real counterplay, because that can lead to a very stale, unexciting meta. You can also think about it in terms of the most, as an aggro player, right? The most aggro cards possible, right? Like if we're looking at 1-drops, at a certain point, there's enough really high power 1-drops that someone could just build an entire deck that is nothing but 1-drops. And do we want that to be a viable strategy of nothing but 3 1s just every single card over and over and over again? Is that going to be a fun play pattern? So all these things are things we're keeping in mind of. We kind of try to hold to a budget overall. But I'd say the extremities are the things that we're most concerned about here. The most control deck, the most aggro deck. Mid-range kind of has, by its very nature, it's less able to do things that are just frustrating in that way, where you have so many mid-range tools is not really as much of an issue as so many aggro tools or so many control tools. So we look at the edges for that for sure. But we have a budget of a lot of different things. Another thing I can call out specifically is like hand hate, like
discard.
Discard, yeah, cards that force your opponent to discard. that sort of thing can be, even with getting to draw 2 cards a turn, which our game is nice that way. But even with that, it can get very oppressive if there are enough, discard tools where your opponent is just playing nothing but just force you discard. No one gets to play the game. We definitely keep an eye on those things for sure, and want to make sure that that is not overrepresented.
As just speaking to discard right now, I'm playing a lot of aggression Han, and my key play is force surrender you on turn 4 and dump your hand, and
Yep.
that's already that's frustrated enough people as it is. So certainly a good thing to watch the budget on you. So the budget thing, you made I thought a fairly interesting comment there that, and I want to just kind of dig into this just a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned that your budget, you're budgeting for in an individual sets, of course, for like limited purposes and everything. When we talk about budgeting, you're talking about, how much, how many fake design bucks do we have to spend on cards that discard from hand in this set? If we have 6, 7, 8 cards that are just like efficient discard, that's probably going to get a little out of control in one set. But you mentioned that the budget maybe applies more to the sort of, and you don't have details on it yet, but the full rotation, so whatever set of sets you're expecting to be legal together before anything shifts in and out. Do you consider that budget frequently as like a full, for lack of a better, current term, a full block of sets that are available? And like, so do you ever like go, well, we're not putting a lot of discard into set 4, but that's because set 6 has a discard sub theme and it's going to get a little more of that in there? And is that how you typically consider things in design?
It's definitely one of the things we consider, for sure. Yeah, if we have something that one set is doing a lot of, and we know it's going to exist alongside a different set, we want to make sure that those sets are doing different things and they aren't just giving more tools to the same exact archetypes. Something I like to talk about a lot, and something that I'm a constant voice for on the design side of the game, is that we want each set that comes out needs to shake up the meta. I think Joe O'Neill, who's one of our fellow designers, had the metaphor that I always cite for this, which is that designing this game is like we're piloting a boat and it's sailing, and we want to alternate it sailing to the left and sailing it to the right, but we never want it sailing exactly straight forward. It's kind of a constant overcorrection from side to side to side to side as you go forward, so that each set is doing new things and interesting things and different things, but we're not just designing the same set over and over. Like, we're not just designing set 1 and then designing a different version of set 1 and a different version of set 1. Each set is kind of pushing in a direction, and as long as all the sets aren't pushing in the same direction, we should keep things vibrant and interesting going forward. So yeah, it definitely is something where if I'm designing, say, set 6, I'm looking at what set 5 is doing. I'm looking at, what do I think the meta will be in set 5? Where is set 5 putting its power budget? Is it trying to really push aggro or mid range or control? What kind of archetypes is it trying to push for those things? And then how can when I'm working on set 6, how can I push in different directions or give a new spin on those archetypes so that when set 6 comes out, it won't just look the same. The same decks won't be in the same position. That being said, you obviously want to also put some things in there for people's decks from previous sets. You don't want to do something entirely different. A lot of it is balance. But if you have a great deck from set 1, and then set 2 comes out, set 3 comes out, you're getting no new cool cards to put into your deck, that can be a little deflating. We want to make sure that people are getting like, if you have a really great rebel deck in set 1, we want to make sure that like you're seeing other cool rebel cards come out that you want to, should I include this in my rebel deck? Or maybe makes you want to go back and revisit that deck if you haven't played it for a little bit. That, this is kind of a cool card, maybe that throws a new spin on what that looks like. So yeah, it's a balance between balancing a set internally with what it's trying to do, again, particularly for limited, and then balancing for what we are expecting the constructed metagame to be, by balancing across all the sets that are going to be and exist at the same time.
Very cool. And that's just an interesting point too, towards rotation in general. It's something that TCG players will sometimes have a very polarized reaction to, the concept of rotating in a game. But I think there's or do you believe, the same way I do, that there's I think a benefit to some degree of getting that rotation as a way to sort of reset your power budget in certain ways. Now that X sets have rotated, Those sets had a lot of powerful. We maybe went over budget on discard because of those sets, but now we've dropped down a little bit, and we can put a few more things in and kind of bring it back to a reasonable state. Is that how you guys like to think about things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are certain sets that have a lot more of a certain, like, it's not divided evenly among all the sets, right? So,
Right.
like you say, if we had a set that had a lot of discard in it, that's then eating up a lot of that budget for the sets that immediately follow that set, right? So once that set, like, releases into the wild, once that set is no longer as much of a player, then we can go back and revisit. It's like, okay, well, now we can spread this out a little bit more. We can give a little bit more love to these archetypes in a couple different sets, or do different takes on them, that sort of thing. So it's definitely it's something of a relief sometimes to have rotation from a design side, just because it's less overall. Cards that we have to constantly be checking against each other. It becomes unwieldy very quickly to make a game that is balanced and that we can have an actual finger on what we think the pulse of a meta will be. The more cards you add to that meta. So that's on the one thing, but also just from a design side is very freeing to release certain cards and be able to design new ones. If you think about cards that are meta staples, then every set has to be, and every deck has to think about those cards when it's deciding what it's going to do. And maybe that is that maybe it's takedown, right, where we have 5 HP, so we have to care about 5 HP while takedown is in the meta, and if I'm playing against a vigilance deck. But if takedown eventually were to leave, and we can now set, maybe there's a new, we can adjust this a little bit. We're not going to just reprint exactly the same card, but maybe if there's a slight adjustment, then certain cards become more powerful, certain cards become less powerful. The way you have to think about decks changes a little bit. There's a lot of cool things that happen when that happens. But for those, and I know that people have a lot of strong opinions on rotation, but for those that are concerned about rotation, we only released one set so far. It's not something that you'll have to worry about for a very long time. We'll be, obviously very transparent in how we're going to be going about that.
Of course.
Once we get to that point. Yeah.
Of course. Okay. Well, yeah, thank you. That's a lot of interesting insight into the design process. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to fly to a different planet here, one that has 2 suns above it. So let's talk about Twin Suns a little bit. Twin Suns, of course, exciting, casual format, very fun. Have played a ton of it myself. Really, really enjoy the core rule set you guys came up with. First question, very, very simple one for you. How involved were you specifically, Ryan, in the development of the rule set for Twin Suns?
Sure. Pretty involved, I would say. We the timeline of it kind of goes that we arrived at FFG, all of us new designers, and they hadn't figured out how they were going to assign us to future sets yet. Sets were in development, but they hadn't decided exactly where they were going to place us and how they were going to divide us up, and any of that yet. And so in the meantime, it fell to us to codify how the multiplayer format was going to be, and there were some vague ideas, and maybe 1 or 2 kind of games had been played of multiplayer, but they hadn't really figured out how exactly it was all going to work. So for a while, the 4 of us just kind of played a lot of Twin Suns. It didn't have a name back then, but we just played a lot of the format and experimented with a lot of different things, different directions. Should we go this way? Should we go that way? Should this happen? Should that happen? How should numbers adjust? Anything like that? We had the basics of how we kind of wanted it to work. We originally weren't even testing it with 2 leaders. That was a thing that we tried out. We were like, I wonder if this could work. I wonder if 2 leaders would just totally break the game and it would be impossible to play, or whether it would be a lot of fun to play. And it turned out it was a lot of fun to play. So we kept that. We were trying to decide how to make it to incentivize, ending the game, but also try to keep in touch, like have a good length for the game was important. So yeah, we just kind of kept iterating and trying new things, and eventually we ended up with Twin Suns now. And we also iterated on, I think, like, I want to say, maybe this is exaggeration, but I want to say like 80 odd names for it. There were a lot of different names considered for what we were going to call it as well. We just kept coming up with new ones, and then just went into a massive spreadsheet.
And what percentage of those were like regular, just like this is an everyday word name that just works, or versus how many were like direct like Star Wars meme quote names.
It was a good spread. I think almost all the ones that I pitched were extremely Star Wars meme names.
Nice.
And then I think that we also, at some point, someone stepped in and was like, we also need to come up with some just like basic normal names so we can have a good spread of possible names for this. Just like, what are some like one-word names that are just, it feels like we're all fighting together. So yeah, we pitched a lot of names and went through a whole process on that. But it ended up with Twin Suns, which I think is a really solid description.
Was that one of the names you submitted, or someone else?
I can lay claim to Twin Suns.
Yes,
that was specifically mine. Yeah,
awesome. That must feel good.
Well, it's great, but also when it goes out into the world, you're hoping that people don't hate it because then that was your pitch, and it was there were a lot of other really really good names for it as well that people came up with.
I'm sure. Yeah. I like poking a little bit because it's kind of fun. It's a great team that I'm sure had a million great names that all would have been good. I can say I was a big fan of Twin Suns, and I love the way it just encapsulates that idea immediately. When the name was teased, everyone was like, is this like a 2v2 format or something? And no one could quite they knew there was something interesting there, but we couldn't pin down what it was. And then I remember hearing it was 2 leaders at the community event. And I never even once considered what if I had 2 leaders in play. So for me, that was just like a mind blowing moment. I'm like, you can do that? That's wild. I
think I was sitting at your table when that was announced.
Yeah, you were.
Your eyes goggling a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it's really good to hear how involved you were in the design process, because that would be really helpful for the questions I'm about to ask you.
Sure.
So in particular, the one thing that I found really interesting was that when we learned the rule set for Twin Suns, I noted that there were a few things and I'm not gonna answer it for you here, but a few things that I thought were potentially affecting some of what I consider pain points in casual multiplayer formats, in TCGs in general. And so I wanted to prod at you a little bit here and see what do you consider some of the main problems or pain points that you players could experience when they play any game in a sort of casual multiplayer setting, and how did you design Twin Suns to attempt to address those?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's one that you're kind of dancing around a little bit that I think.
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, there are lots of multiplayer formats that are really really excellent. But one of the things that I know that people sometimes have difficulty with is the idea of player elimination in any game, not just TCGs. It can be really really brutal. I remember. I was playing a game once with some friends of mine. My friend had actually invited me to the game, and I was playing with 2 other of his friends that I didn't know. My friend got knocked out of the game in the first 15 minutes, and our game took 2.5 hours. So he just got to sit there and watch me play, and luckily he is the kind of guy who gets really into other people playing games. But if that was me, I would have been a lot more frustrated than he was. He took it very nicely. But yeah, so we went into it from the very, very beginning. We do not want player elimination in this game. We want it to wrap up after one player is gone, so you can get right into the next game. If you want to keep playing, which we did. So that was one of the first things that we came up with, was the idea that we don't want player elimination. We want to make sure that at the end of the round, when the player is knocked out, we want the game to end, so it can wrap up very nicely. And then it naturally followed that. Okay, well, remaining base health is a really important number here, because that can help determine that victory at the end of the round. But then what we came to internally was, okay, well, everyone is just playing healing decks and refusing to attack each other, because everyone's just like, well, if I just keep my HP high on my base, then I can't lose the game. I'll win, right? So let everyone else fight, and I just won't fight. And those games were extremely boring, and so. We ended up coming up with the idea of, okay, well, what if we incentivize players taking out a player by giving them some sort of reward? And we experimented with a bunch of different rewards. Ended up being that healing 5 off your own base was kind of the perfect sweet spot of we want to make sure that I can play a slightly more aggro because I want to be the player that knocks out another player specifically, so that I can then heal a little bit and maybe push me up a little bit higher to compete with some of the other players' bases. It's interesting because our games internally, some people have talked about they think the game is too fast in the wild, which is entertaining because a lot of our games internally were very strategic and tactical, and everyone just slowly decreases their base health, and no one wants to really pull the first trigger. But the base bounty, if you can call it that, is kind of nice for that. One of the ones I can tell you we experimented with was getting to take another turn if you knocked out a player, which led to some very weird combo strategies where people would build a deck that was trying to take out all three players at once, or try to you take out a player and then play this giant sentinel or something to protect. So that's one of the many other things that we tried for that. But it turned out that base health was really elegant and played into helped remind people of how the game was going to end. So we ended up going with the 5 health heal off your base to help incentivize that, which kind of solved the problem that we were having of the games taking too long. And so, yeah, now it's in a really sweet spot, I think. I really love Twin Suns.
Yeah, and I mean, you get to play much more robust, I guess. Maybe that's a good word for Twin Suns games than us with whatever 5-6 sets or whatever at your disposal right now. And I can't wait for our card pool to grow that big too.
I will say the Twin Suns games that you can get to at a certain point in the game can be wild. And the nice thing about it is that with so many leaders that we're printing in the sets, the combinations inherent, like at least set 2 already, the combinations are crazy, and they're plenty that we haven't tried internally. But we do really like Twin Suns a lot on the design team. We've started the thing where we try to when we get towards the end of a set and we're pushing it out the door, we play a big Twin Suns game just with cards from that set and all the previous sets, and try to create cool decks for that. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So I'm going to reference past interview. I'm referencing, I think, mostly the Force Unlimited interview again here.
Well researched, sure.
Yes, I try to listen to as much as I can too. Especially going to this, I didn't want to just be like, I'm just going to ask all the same questions that they asked over there. So this allowed me to make sure I was asking some interesting things. So in that interview, you talked a little bit about how the team has particular design goals when they're designing sets, example, or just the game in general. Certain design goals, such as trying to encourage combat to flow a certain way by having stats arranged in particular ways on units, often putting a little more HP on units to make sure they can survive hits because of how easy it is to just knock out your opponent's stuff right away when they play something, which also limits including abilities like shoot first. I believe in a Tyler interview, he mentioned they tried that as a core mechanic on a bunch of characters at first. It was like, okay, that's just absurd.
Yeah.
That is not as much. Actually, I love playing shoot first, and the amount I love playing shoot first means that if that were everywhere, that would be just a brutal mechanic to have.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how, what kind of design goals the team has, if they might be the same or different when you're looking specifically at Twin Suns? Like, how do you take the idea of we want to make good Twin Suns games and use that to impact the way that you're designing cards for sets? Are there particular effects or stat adjustments you look for that?
Sure. Yeah, it's really interesting. There are certain cards, obviously, that are designed with multiplayer in mind. You can see, a card like Set 1's Yoda, where you can choose any number of players; they all get to draw a card. So I forget someone who plays him a lot on our design team always will just play Yoda and say, whoever defeats this Yoda doesn't get to draw a card. Everyone else gets to. you decide. And so those sorts of things that you're keeping in mind the idea that Twin Suns is inherently more of a political game. I guess you could say, making sure that there are some card effects that allow you to play those sorts of little games and have those conversations with other players, or it's something as simple as any card that really you can see on the ability that it wants multiple players in the game, or it gets better as multiple players get into the game. Even as something as simple as making a card and having to think about whether it says deal or heal 1 damage from your base versus heal 1 damage from a base, right? Even something as simple as that is a move that we make with certain cards to say, well, we want this card to be more of a player in Twin Suns, or at least have more of an interesting play pattern in Twin Suns. And that can be true for cards that we don't think are going to see as much play necessarily. And a really easy way to take a card that we think is just not going to ever really be constructed viable is to give it a little bit more multiplayer flavor, and then maybe it can show up in Twin Suns, because Twin Suns, for those that don't know, it's a singleton format. You can only use one of each type of card in your deck. So you have a lot more flexibility to include a lot of cards that maybe you wouldn't otherwise, and having some of those cards that have a little bit more extra oomph in multiplayer can be really nice to give those cards a home, a place to live if they're not going to be showing up in constructed decks as much. So that's one of the things we kind of are thinking about when we're designing things for Twin Suns. We never want the game is classically the 1v1. That's the sort of bread and butter of the game. And Twin Suns is inherently a little bit more casual, a little more political, a little more grab a group of friends and have some fun with the game. So we would never want to compromise a card's effectiveness to make it good in Twin Suns specifically. But there are a lot of times we can kind of have our cake and eat it too, by making a card that works really well in Limited, for instance, and then also works well in Twin Suns or something.
In our experience playing, Twin Suns felt like, unlike some other multiplayer formats for other card games we played, the core game, at least in the set one Twin Suns, felt very similar between a single player game and a multiplayer game with regards to like how late the game went, what was the kind of the high end for cards you were able to play and get an impact from. So I'm just curious, obviously there's a bunch of effects where you say, well, you can just make this target any player or multiple players, but did you find at all that you had to go and adjust any like core stats on a card, anywhere from cost to HP to power to anything like that, because of Twin Suns in particular, or have you had to do that in any future sets?
Yeah, I think that there is one of the things we don't really actually think too much or put too much time into like stat adjustments for Twin Suns on cards specifically. This is mostly because the nice thing about the rules for this particular game is because you're always able to attack whatever you want with your units, aside from obviously sentinels or specific things. Twin Suns has ended up, at least internally in our testing, to be very self-balancing. If a player comes with a very highly tuned deck and the other players are just having fun with it and just putting two characters together because they like those characters, oftentimes the player who has built the finely tuned deck will be targeted down, or that plays the big unit. Like, okay, this unit has a lot of health, but can it sustain 3 direct attacks from 3 different players before it gets back to your action again? The alternating action system does a lot of the heavy lifting for making sure that Twin Suns games end up relatively balanced, because really it's about somewhat projecting weakness when you're strong, and the political side of things, to get a good Twin Suns game in, or to perform well at the game. So there's actually less stat adjustment than you would think. It's mostly related to abilities, and things that we think, okay, this ability might be a little bit too good in Twin Suns, or this ability might be something that is we can push a little bit harder in Twin Suns without it affecting the classic 1v1 Premier format.
Cool. Awesome. Speaking of people picking leaders that seem fun and seem cool and thematically go together, I found it just interesting that when we heard about Twin Suns and everybody started exploring, okay, well, what leaders do we have? How do they go together? A number of players very astutely noticed that, well, hang on a second. If I play Han and Chewie together, I can use Han to make a bunch of extra resources, drop him, make an extra resource, drop Han, attack, make an extra resource, and now I'm at the number to put Chewie out, which just felt like peanut butter and jelly. It was like a perfect combination. So I was curious, was that a coincidence that just lined up for Twin Suns, or was there any tweaking that the team kind of went after you got the Twin Suns rule set down? Did you go, oh, hang on, let's go back and like tweak some of the leaders to make Twin Suns combinations work in set 1, set 2, whatever?
Yeah, I can honestly say that the Han Chewie combination is pure coincidence, and it is happy coincidence that it worked out so well. The really Twin Suns rules were codified well after set one was fully finished, and so the idea of we knew that multiplayer was going to exist in the game, and we knew there were some rumblings that like maybe we would try out multiple leaders, maybe we'd try out multiple bases. There were a lot of different directions that we could have gone in at the time when set one was happening and being designed. So nothing was from set one at least was specifically designed with Twin Suns in mind. Although we wanted to make sure it was multiplayer friendly from the very beginning. But as far as responding to the specific rule set of Twin Suns, not like the leaders weren't adjusted for it, and I'm extremely happy that it worked out as well as it did with Han and Chewie specifically, because I love that combination. The other one, Krennic and Grand Inquisitor are also it's just a great fun combination to play together. There's a lot of other fun synergies. It's one of those things that happens a lot, and we'll say in future interviews as well. There are certain card combinations that we know that no one will believe us that we didn't design it on purpose, but there are certain ones that we just happen to design two cards, and then we're like, oh, I wonder if these two cards work together, and they work together just perfectly. And we're always like, should we tell people that, like, do we want people to think that we're that smart that we planned this, or do we want to acknowledge that like sometimes you just get really lucky and cards work out really well together. So yeah, the Han Chewie thing is based on other decisions, but I'm really happy that it worked out in Twin Suns as well as it did. Some future sets, future leaders that we're designing after Twin Suns exists. There might be some other synergies where we know in advance that like, oh, this is going to be cool.
Yeah, that's actually was my very next question, was just about future leaders. How much do you take into account thematic pairings with past leaders? For example, let's say this is not a spoiler or anything. Let's say there's a hypothetical Baze Malbus leader. How much do you think about how much would you be thinking about his ability with regards to like, well, people are going to want to pair him with Chirrut from set one. So do you put any stock into like, oh, we got to make sure those two kind of pair nicely together in some way? So he's got to do something with health or upgrades or something, or like, or do you just go, let's just see what players figure out?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that most of the time, I mean, if I was in charge of designing this hypothetical Baze Malbus leader, I think I would definitely want to create a leader that worked with the Chirrut leader in Twin Suns. I think that we would never want to compromise, that leader's viability as a standalone leader just so that it works in Twin Suns. But if we could make it work, and oftentimes, with the ideas of characters and the game being as flexible as it is, you can often create a cool idea that would work and then would also synergize really well. So I know that I can speak personally. If I was getting to design that leader, I would want to make sure it worked in Twin Suns. I can't guarantee that all of the leaders that come out are going to pair perfectly exactly as you want, but we'll also, at some point, we'll be repeat leaders, right? We'll have
Right.
more leaders of certain types, and there's always more space to make leaders that synergize particularly well for Twin Suns. And the pool's only growing over time, so I'm sure there's synergies that we won't even realize that are happening, and then you'll have me on here again for an interview, and you ask me, was that planned? And I'll say, no, it wasn't. But it's really cool that it works out. Or maybe I'll say yes, it was, because some of them are. There are some cool potential things coming up for Twin Suns that I can't talk to yet, but
Right.
There's some neat stuff coming.
My biggest disappointment was just that Han, this version of Han, he had not yet decided to be a rebel, and he's only underworld. And I really wanted to pair Han and Leia, but they just, I mean, you can, of course, you certainly can, but I want Leia specifically to command Han to attack, and she can't do that quite. She doesn't have that kind of influence on Han. He's too much of a lone smuggler right now. But in the future, I'm looking forward to whenever we get a General Han Solo or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. There certainly are Hans that would love to be commanded. to attack. Yeah.
Okay. Couple more questions for you here. We're gonna delve into your rules admiral. Put your rules admiral hat on for us. And I don't know, okay. I was about to be really impressed if you pulled
if I just had a hat nearby within arm's reach.
Oh, okay. Let me get my hat. Yeah.
Man, I wish I did now.
Yeah. For the next interview, let's just be ready with the rules admiral hat. So I actually, in my question here, I wrote point man. I'm going to go with admiral though. As the admiral for the comprehensive rules for Star Wars Unlimited, what would you say was and this is going to be maybe a tough one to think about. What was the most difficult part of that detailed rule structure that you had to figure out how to lay out and codify, and what made that element of the rules so tricky?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, first I want to definitely shout out Alex. We have a game rules specialist at FFG who helped create the backbone for what would eventually be the rules before handing it off to me to make sure it all like worked together in the game. So a lot of props to her for creating something to work off of for sure. But yeah, there were some difficult things in there. On the one hand, one of the most difficult things, just personally, was coming onto a game that was already designed, and then let's make the rules for it, where most of those rules existed in the heads of three people who had designed the game, and we need to get it onto paper. And so the idea of just trying to come up with every possible interaction that I could ask them about. I followed them around for several months, just asking them every possible question about every possible interaction I could just think of. I would just write them all down at home, and then I would go into the office and just be like, okay, how would this work? How would this work? How would this work? And just trying to make sure that we covered all of our bases for that. So that was, I'm trying to be exhaustive, because even I would much prefer there to be a ruling in the comprehensive rules that is somewhat unclear that we can clarify, rather than an interaction that is wholly uncovered and there's just no answer for it all, and you have to just come up with your own answer. So just trying to be exhaustive about that, and making sure that it would be something that people could reference easily. Was one of the big things. If you're talking about specific sections, it is definitely the triggered actions section that took the most time, and is taking more time. I can give you the sneak preview that I have rewritten some of that section, not to change how it works, but just to try to better explain how some of it works, since that's one of the sections that has also caused a lot of questions in the public now that has been released. And that's something else that anyone who's written any sort of long document, or even just like a novel or something, I hope can sympathize with the idea that eventually you've reread the same paragraph so many times that it doesn't even feel like words to you. And so you need to get it in front of other people, and then they tell you this makes, like this is very unclear in this way or that way. And so one of the things that's nice about a TCG compared to a board game, to call back to an earlier question, is that we can continue to update the comprehensive rules for this game and adjust it. And we don't need to publish necessarily tons of errata, or, oh, well, here's all the other things, or here's how it all works on like the website for all the FAQ and things. We can literally go in and adjust the comprehensive rules, which I am currently in the process of doing. We'll release a new version of the comp rules with set 2.
Awesome. With set 2 is when the new version of the comp rules will be there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
There will be version 2.0 will come out right alongside, I think maybe a little bit before set 2. Not exactly sure on the date yet.
Sure.
But there will be a new version of the comp rules with new rules to account for all the new stuff that set 2 is adding, as well as some clarifications and fixes to things that people have caught in the wild since from the first version. I feel like such a nerd, but which, I mean, you guys know I am, but it's very exciting to hear about the new version of the rules coming. Just with reference to, board game publishing, it gave me a little nostalgic twinge as I was thinking about all the times I've been playing a board game and I pull up Board Game Geek and I have to find did the developer post an FAQ post in the Board Game Geek forums? That's the only place where I'll find an answer to this very specific rules question. So it's, of course, nice to have a codified online comprehensive rules always. Yeah.
So I mean, I expected triggered triggered abilities, nested actions, nested abilities to be the section that, as someone who's been delving into it deeply myself, I made an entire video on nested
Oh,
actions
great.
just because that was I look at getting my rules questions. It was about every other question was just about what happens when this it triggers during this thing or whatever. Like, okay, I'm just gonna I can't just put this in as like a bullet point in an FAQ video. I'll make an entire video just trying my best in my own words to explain how I think these not how I think these how the comprehensive rules say these work
Mhm.
specifically. Um, and overall, just like with the comprehensive rules, I've been I mentioned this to you right before we started recording, but I've been really impressed with um, just as I got all those questions, I had almost nothing that I couldn't just go, oh yeah, this point, that answers your question 100%. There's no argument. It's no debate. That's just clearly the answer to things, which is just lovely to have because it's so necessary. You mentioned too the three designers. They had a game in your head that works in your head is not always the same as a game with laid out comprehensive rules. Like once you start designing more cards, it's very easy to find breakpoints in those things. So I can't imagine the task you and Alex had to sit down and create a skeleton of like, okay, well, this is what they meant is supposed to happen when you play this. So it's almost working backwards from how you think things should work. Did you feel that way at all?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, they're obviously like very good designers, and so it was
Yeah.
helpful to know that it would all be consistent, and that like at the end of the day, once I got it all out of them, I felt like I was extracting it piece by
Yep.
piece sometimes. But once I got it all out, we got it on the page. It all worked, which was great. And it would have been much worse if we got it all out and realized, oh well, you know situation A and situation B are completely different rules and don't interact at all, and there's no that would have been a disaster. But luckily they're all very good at their jobs, and so they created a system that is. I think once you grasp couple core concepts, it's pretty easy to intuitively understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
one of those is how triggered abilities work.
Yeah. It was just interesting going from someone who knows all the games with stacks and chains and everything to see nested actions of like, oh, what's this? And then I read through and I'm like, this is just a sort of I felt like it was a fairly intuitive way of describing how to use something that like is normally very abstracted, like there is a stack of things and we go up and down in it. Where like instead I got to imagine it as a graph of things that were nested within other things. I thought, oh, I think that makes sense. So I
Yeah,
appreciated that. Uh, One
I like
thing.
to. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead. No, please.
I was just gonna say I like to think of it as if like algorithmically like depth first search. That's how I like to explain it to people.
Sure.
It's depth first search. You follow it all the way down and then you go back and then you go back and then you go all the way back up and then you like it's just depth first search with a couple different pools of actions, and if you can grasp that, it all kind of clicks, I think.
I have at least. Oh, I have actually a few graphics in that nested actions video that um, call to that idea as well, trying to show people, how to follow those lines
Mm-hmm.
that way. So like I said, almost everything perfectly answered. The one, and I'm gonna pin you on this right now because I feel a personal duty to answer this question because it's the one question I said I cannot 100% answer this right now. So I'm going to see if you can help out and just give my audience member, at least the one who asked this question, that clean answer.
Sure.
So the last one I had was Ozzel and nested
Mm-hmm.
actions. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so Ozzel says each opponent may ready a unit after. That's the text that is after you may play a unit from your hand. And the question everybody asks is when you say you play a Death Trooper off of Ozzel. So we have the nested action. We have to resolve the Death Trooper. Do we know which unit is being readied already because we had to finish resolving Ozzel, or were we interrupted to resolve the Death Trooper and the opponent hasn't yet chosen what they are readying? And the comp rules, I just can't get to a clean understanding with a couple of different points in there for the audience. So do you mind
Sure.
talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. I'm glad you brought this up. This is one of the clarifications I'm attempting to make right now to the comprehensive rules document for version 2.0. Will hopefully make this a lot cleaner and clearer about how this specific interaction works. I mean, the short answer is that triggered abilities. If you separate trigger from resolve, right, which I'm sure you've explained, right? Abilities will trigger and then they'll resolve. So ability triggers when something happens, but only resolves once it reaches a point that we turn to the abilities. And those resolution windows are, in almost all cases, going to be after the currently resolving abilities. So a triggered ability would never interrupt a currently resolving ability in order to resolve itself. So for Ozzel specifically, you play the card and then you ready the units, and then you turn to the pool to see if there are any triggered things waiting there, like when played, for instance. So yes, officially here I can say that Ozzel, the when played, the triggers only happens at the end of Ozzel's full ability resolving. It triggers when you play the card, resolves at the end. There's no place for it to resolve in the middle of the ability that's resolving. The only place that this is weird is when you have an ability that tells you to take multiple actions. So if you have an ability that says play 2 cards or attack with 2 units, as in Leader Leia from set 1. Attack with a unit, then attack with another unit. Those are 2 actions. They have to happen sequentially. And in between them, there's obviously a place for the resolutions of triggers to happen. So if I said play 2 cards, if you said an ability that said play 2 cards, you play the first card, trigger any when played or anything, resolve any when played, and then play your second card. So if you look at set 1 Darth Vader, for instance, set 1 Darth Vader can possibly play multiple units at the same time. You play them sequentially and resolve the triggers sequentially. But for any ability that only has you take 1 action, so only has 1 attack or 1 card play, you think of it kind of as a modified version of taking that action. And there's no place for those triggered abilities to resolve until that full ability that is currently resolving finishes resolving. If that helps.
Okay.
Again, the update to the comprehensive rules I'm currently working on hopefully will do a much clearer job of explaining that than the current rules. The current comprehensive rules, I think that is a bit muddied between the idea of what a nested action means in terms of an ability that tells you to do multiple of them versus an ability that just tells you to do 1. I think that's a little bit unclear with how the current comp rules are written, but that is something that we're going to be adjusting that section going forward to make it very clear how that is supposed to work.
Sure. And if I can just try and ask a little bit extra to
Please,
make sure I want to have a full clear understanding here too. So you mentioned if there's a single action, you resolve the ability that creates that action in its entirety before you resolve any triggers from that action. How does that apply to when the action is an attack and then has an on attack trigger, potential on defeat trigger? Do those then have to, I mean, I don't think those have to wait until after the attack, right? Or do they? So if, let's say Ozzel said perform an attack, then an opponent readies a unit.
Mm-hmm.
Do they?
Yeah.
How does that resolve?
Yeah, that's a great question. You will note that there are no cards that do that currently in the card pool.
Correct. Granted.
No, I mean that. I mean that not to call you out. I mean that purely that we on the design side have specifically avoided that kind of ability so far because that is complicated. There will be templating to allow for that. The templating will look a little bit different because, as you say, it would be very weird to say, attack with a unit, then ready a unit, and the timing on that would be very unclear. So when we do finally reach the point that we have abilities that say attack with a unit and do a thing all as 1 ability, there'll be a different templating for that, and the wording of the templating will allow for clear timing windows within that.
Okay.
Yeah, there will eventually be a templating that will allow for that, but it will be different slightly than what currently exists.
Okay, that's interesting, and that helps me make sense of this. And I think the thing that you said that just intuitively made the most sense was treating it as a modified version of the action, because I already understand, if I play sneak attack, I'm going to play the unit, but it enters play ready. It's sort of like a modified version of a play action. So when we think about Ozzel, it's play the unit, not that it's worded this way, but the opponent also gets to ready something, and then you complete anything that was triggered on the play. Does that sound like I have a good grasp of that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you think about it, you can think of even something like surprise strike, where attack with the unit, it gets plus for the attack, is the idea that like that's coming after the attack with the unit, of course, but it is a modification. It's one action, the event ability says to take one attack action, and it's got some extra stuff appended to that attack action. So a ability that said play a card and do some other things, that's adding to that and modifying that play a card action, but it's only telling you to take one play a card action, and there's no place within that play a card action to resolve triggers until the ability that it's currently resolving is fully over.
Okay, all right, I like it. I feel good. So now we understand. You play the Death Trooper with Ozzel, your opponent readies something, and then we deal damage to things.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. You heard it here first.
Yes, here it is. Thank you.
And then you will hear it again in the Comprehensive Rules version 2.0.
Yes, and we'll have more fun ways to read it to understand exactly what you mean this time.
Yeah, the card you mentioned, Ozzel here. The card that this affects most of all is Galactic Ambition, a card I'm sure you're familiar with, which says to play a card from your hand, then deal damage to your base afterwards. Right. So if it triggered in the middle of that, you would be able to potentially ambush out an overwhelm unit to win before that base damage hit you. But it is important for the design of the card that the base damage happens before any when played for playing that unit. And so we don't want that to be a way to cheekily sneak out a win. It is intended to be not exactly a cost, but a part of playing that card is damaging your own base.
Well, that's too bad, because that sounds kind of fun now. That I never once thought about that, because I don't think we have a card right now in the pool that really works perfectly with that. But now I'm sad that I'll never get to experience that, explaining to my opponent that, no, actually, I win the game first. So just so we don't confuse anybody, you take the damage on Galactic Ambition. I started saying a different thing, but you take the damage and then you resolve the one played. So, too bad. Alas, that's all right. That's all right. All right. Well, Ryan, this has been enlightening in a number of ways. Before I have you kick out of here, I always like, whenever I interview anyone on the FFG team, I have a question that I like to ask that is completely for fun, not anything that you're going to have to delve into any design secrets or anything for. But it's because everyone here is a Star Wars fan to some degree. But as you know, Star Wars fans are the most passionate fans in every way possible. They express it in so many different ways, their passion. And as passionate fans, the other thing that Star Wars fans like to do is have very clear and, in their mind, objective rankings of things. It's just, I don't know why. It's like a crow to shiny objects. We have to rank them. So I like to ask my interviewees on this the most important question, which is, when it comes to the Skywalker saga 1 through 9, so not counting Rogue One, not counting Solo, do you have a particular film that you rank as your number one that resonates the most with you? And everyone tends to have different answers.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna buy myself a little bit of time by saying that I'm a big believer in never rank, always tier. So I'm not gonna use that as a cop-out. I will choose one movie, but I will say that personally, I find it easier to make tiers of things than to try to do the nitty-gritty of putting them all in a specific order.
It is easier, and I also do think in some cases it is a cop-out, because it is fun to just have to commit yourself to something, I think, sometimes too.
Sure.
You can change your mind later.
Right now. Yeah, I'll commit right now. And I will give you the explanation as to why. But I am a Star Wars original Episode 4: A New Hope, just Star Wars as it was originally called, is my personal favorite and the one that resonates the most with me. There is a movie critic that I like to read a lot of his reviews, and he talks, or he wrote something at some point talking about how no matter what, whenever you make a sequel or a prequel to any film or anything that exists, right? You are always making the world smaller, necessarily, because before that sequel or prequel exists, anything could have happened, right? And even though you're making one cool thing, and that might have other stories that spin off of it, and those are all really great, you can never quite fully recapture the unlimited possibilities that the original world had, the galaxy had first. And so one of the reasons that I like the original Star Wars film so much is that there are so many unanswered questions in it. There's so many just casual references, like the Clone Wars, just
Clone Wars,
casually thrown out. No one has any idea what it means. You can invent your own idea of like, were there clones? Why were there clones? What were they fighting over? None of that is explained. And there's so many unanswered questions and open-ended questions in the original Star Wars. And I this is not to throw any shade on the other films that attempted to explain what the Clone Wars were. I deeply love the Clone Wars series. Like, a lot of that is all really great. But to me personally, what resonates the most is the looking to the horizon, not knowing what's out there, of watching the original movie for the first time, and that sort of it spurred my mind to think about all these sorts of things back then, and think about what could that mean? What could these different things be referring to, and create my own little universe and my own canon and my own ideas of what those stories could be. And I think that the first movie does such a good job of putting you in a place of stories, because Star Wars is all about the stories, and it puts the beginning and the ending of so many stories, right? It's the beginning of Luke's story, it's the end of Obi-Wan's story, and none of those have been fleshed out yet. And if you can ever go back, it's almost impossible now with how Star Wars is everywhere. But if you can ever go back and rewatch the original movie and try to unlearn, just forget for a little bit everything else that exists about the saga and everything else that exists about the extended universe and everything. And just watch it as though it was fresh and as though you have no idea what any of the things are referring to. It is such a pleasurable experience. It's so much fun to watch and just get into the creativity on the screen and the creativity it inspires in you. And as someone who has a very creative profession of designing cards for this game and finding cool little niche characters from various episodes of things and trying to find a place for them in the game, and trying to create, to go back to one of my earlier answers, a toolbox for other players and other people to be creative with. That really speaks to me, how that first movie does such a good job of inspiring people watching it to be creative and imaginative and think about what else could be out there. So my answer is solidly the original Star Wars movie.
That's an answer that feels, from what I understand about you, Ryan, feels very correct for you so far. I like that a lot. I wish I could go back to 77 and be there in the theater, be alive and be there in the theater and actually just take it all in, having no knowledge about everything else. When any potential sequel that could come out to Star Wars would, with your mind's eye is able to picture anything that could happen, any sequel that could come would simply be a splinter of the mind's eye, if you will. And that was my cute little Star Wars deep cut reference that I had to make there at the very end. But Ryan, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time with me today to talk about all things design, Twin Suns, and even humoring my honestly selfish desire just to get that question answered about Admiral Ozzel for my audience.
Yeah, well, from one Admiral to that Admiral. Yeah, happy to answer it. And thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. Great questions. I love talking about the game and seeing people passionate about the game. And I'm really happy that the channel is doing so well and people are asking you all these rules questions. Take some of the pressure off me.
Yeah, I do what I can. I'm your bodyguard. I'm shielding right in front of you before they start finding your email address and sending you emails directly. Hopefully they do not. But as usual, everyone, if you have more rules questions, this never stops you from doing it. So just go ahead and ask them in the comments down below. And if there's anything that I can't answer, I'll go ahead and ping Ryan again, and we'll just try and get everything answered for you if possible. But thank you all so much for watching today. I hope you found this interesting. We'll have more Star Wars Unlimited content coming for you, of course, at the very least weekly, if not more than that. So thank you all. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you guys in the next one.
Bye, folks.